I'll tell you two things about me. See if they sound in common with you. I'm a salesperson and I don't like to follow rules. Sound familiar? We're going to talk about systems and processes. They're a good thing if you let them be. And we're going to talk about it with Thon next on Purpose Under Pressure. Welcome back. My name's Brian, and this is Purpose Under Pressure. It's a podcast about developing sales and leadership success on purpose and under pressure. It's brought to you by the professional sales and leadership training team at Sandler by the Ruby Group. You'll find them in Akron and in Columbus, Ohio. They're in Jacksonville, Florida. They're in Capital Region, New York. They do their work on purpose so that you and your team can represent that way, the way that you want to represent on purpose, the way you were built to represent, the way you want your salespeople to tell your stories, the types of customers you want to bring on purpose. Nothing good happens by accident. You've got to plan these things out. And when you do, and when you know where you want to go, reach out to the folks at Sandler by the Ruby Group. They're going to help you get there. You can connect with them online at therubygroup.sandler.com. The Ruby Group, actionable strategies for today's toughest business challenges. So let's get cooking. Let's get the show on the road. I know this about salespeople. I've been one for 36 years. We don't like to follow the rules, at least most of us. We like to break them a little, maybe do it our own way. We're special that way, I think. And so I asked Thon, a partner and trainer at Sandler by the Ruby Group, to join me this week. I know he is training some of the Ruby Group clientele on this concept of processes and systems right now as we speak, and why they're important, why we need them. And so that tweaked my interest. Let's talk about it. Thon, welcome to Purpose Under Pressure.
Thank you, Brian. Good being with you.
I'm glad you're here. I know other people need systems and processes to keep things in line, but do sellers really need to follow those systems and processes? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you ask the seller, they would probably say, I'm good. Mm-hmm. But when we index performance and leadership expectations and accountabilities, Sandler is, Brian, a process and a methodology into itself.
On its own, yeah.
And so we are, hand over heart, big believers on processes and systems and the accountabilities that come with those to ensure making a difference in your business.
So you mentioned the methodology and you do things on purpose that way. Where have you seen it go wrong? If I don't have a system in place or a process in place for sales in general and the process of sales, where do things get sideways? How do I know things are wrong?
Great question. The thing that immediately comes to mind is chasing or stalking after prospects. The Sandler process calls for setting specific steps for each conversation. And when we are not, or sellers are not checking those boxes, our prospects, their prospects, can go into this hide mode thing. They are ghosting us. And because I abandon my process, because I get happy ears, because they're sending me buying signals, where in fact, that was nothing more than them doing their due diligence to get information about our product. And that ends up costing us time.
Give me an example, Thon. The Sandler way is the Sandler way. Other people have their systems. But give me an example of if I skip one. So I'm going through the process, maybe walk me through a little bit, and I skip one. How does that allow the customer to kind of take control of the process that way?
Yeah. So what I'm reminded of is what we call mutual mystification. And that is where there is not an alignment between the seller and the prospect about what's going to happen in the meeting, why we're meeting, and where do we go from here. One of the fundamental beliefs and deliverables of Sandler is shortening the sales cycle. And when we skip steps, and Sandler, we might be the right fit for your business. We may not be. But at the end of the day, the steps are designed to shorten the sales cycle. And one of the most powerful talk tracks we have is when we give our prospects permission to tell us no. Because, Sandler is a communication system built for sales, designed to get to the truth. And if the truth is no, let's get there sooner than later so I can take that time allocation and devote it to a better qualified prospect.
The what was it called again, Tom?
Mutual mystification.
Mutual mystification.
That's when we're in meetings and we're not sure why we're here.
Yeah.
How long is it going to last? Why is he here? Why is she here? Why am I here?
And so it's part of the sales process to identify and set those expectations in advance. And if we skip that step, then the buyer thinks they're in one spot, the seller thinks they're in another spot. They start assuming where the other one is, and no one really knows where to go from there. I'm interested in this. Do most businesses already have a system or a process set up for their sellers? And the sellers are just ignoring them? Or are most businesses just kind of winging it and don't realize that all these steps exist?
Yes to both, Brian.
Yeah, is that right?
Yes to both. Experienced brands with a high level and consistency of performance typically will have a process. But we see lots of businesses, good-sized businesses, double-digit million-dollar top-line businesses that are getting by with winging it, maybe the strength of the brand, because that's the way we've always done it, which are challenging words to hear. But if prospects recognize the opportunity to have an organizational change, behavior change, belief, and an opportunity to do something different for a better outcome, we typically are having those conversations.
So I'm interested in this as we go. So we're talking about businesses adopting systems for their team so that they can grow. You're leading a seminar right now about systems trumping everything. So we got to rely on those systems. But what if, Tom, and I was one of these guys. I was successful as a salesperson until I met Sandler. I was successful as a salesperson, and I didn't have a system, at least not one that I knew of. I was just out there doing the best I could, and I kept bringing in numbers, and away I went. And I was the top producer, and everything was great. Now, I improved when I started implementing the system. But how does a sales manager get his top sellers, his pros, his heavy hitters to follow a system when they're bringing in results on their own?
I would suggest that high-performing salespeople still look to develop and grow. And if I could learn one new thing every day, if I have an opportunity to do something a little bit different for a better outcome that's going to put more money in my pocket and it's good for the business as well, those senior experienced sellers, account executives, if they're coachable, they will embrace opportunities to develop and grow. But some salespeople, much like our prospects, will sit there with arms folded, and that's the number one body language defensive position in mankind. And basically it's, I will not be sold. We see that from prospects as well as some salespeople that don't think they can grow and develop.
I bet. And I think when you use those systems and processes to kind of counteract that a little bit with results, look, it works. We've shown it works. It can work. You're right. People who want to do well will have an open mind. I remember, Tom, I'll tell you this story. When I first met Sandler, went to the boot camp. Man, the boot camps are great if people have a chance to go to the boot camps. But I remember my first boot camp, and I ran back to the owner of the company and said, "We need Sandler. We need this. We need this." I said, "I don't need it. But the rest of the team needs this." I said, "I'm already doing just fine." And I found out quickly how wrong I was, because being exposed to a system that allowed me to do the things I was doing already, maybe even better, and to improve the things I was missing, man, did that fill some gaps. And yes. I think that's where a process really can help a business, whether they're doing great or struggling.
Yes. And in fact, I'm reminded of a talk track that we use, Brian, is that our competitors will say, "Well, I'm just going to work harder."
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean and how do you measure it? Because without a process and a system to hold yourself accountable, that's a lot of spinning of the wheels. And so, we want our clients to truly communicate in a differentiated way. And we all have to work harder. But what are the steps and how are we measuring it? And what are the Sandler techniques that I can incorporate into my process that's going to save me time and ideally qualify better prospects, so I'm not wasting time on unqualified prospects?
Tom, there's a business owner out there or a sales manager out there listening to this right now and going, that sounds right. That sounds like something I need. If they were to reach out to you, can you give them an example of what that experience might be like? Because I know for a fact you're not just going to sell them. And so I want them to feel very comfortable reaching out to you. And please also tell them how they can reach out to you and do that.
Well, I appreciate that. The Ruby Group website or tom.tone@sandler.com certainly welcome the conversation. And Brian, it is just a conversation. We're going to spend a little bit of time, if you have a little bit of interest, for me to understand your business and whether or not we can help. And sometimes we can't, depending upon how they go to market and what that, product looks like. It reminds me of, we typically see 4 types of prospects. We can only help 2. So the 4 are changing, growing, rocking and rolling. Those that are what we call in pain. There's this gap of where we are versus where I want to be. And that pain gap, sometimes we can help narrow the gap. The other 2 types of prospects that we typically can't help, they're either comfortable, business is good, life's good, cash flow's good, everything's good, or arrogant. And we can't help those businesses that are arrogant or comfortable. But if that business owner is dealing with change and growth in his business or his industry, and he's trying to keep up, or we've got this thing going on that is growing quarterly or whatever that gap of revenue performance might be, then let's have a conversation and see if Sandler can help.
Folks, I highly suggest that you adopt a process or a system into your business for sellers. I've seen it work, and I've implemented these things, and I know that it makes a difference, whether it's Sandler's or not. I'll tell you, this show with you, Tom, it's been a little bit like a Sandler commercial, but that's okay, because like you said, Sandler is a process. It is a way of getting things done. It's a proven way of getting things done. If business owners have their own, great. But this is also one. So thank you for sharing everything you know about the Sandler systems and the processes, and they do trump everything. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Brian.
That's Tom Thon. He's a partner and trainer at Sandler by the Ruby Group, and we thank him very much for being our guest on Purpose Under Pressure. Folks, thank you too for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We do this every week, sometimes multiple times. So if you do subscribe, you won't miss another episode of Purpose Under Pressure. You'll find all past episodes at brianmediastrategies.com/podcast and wherever you stream your favorite shows. It's brought to you by my friends at the Ruby Group with actionable strategies for today's toughest business challenges. Until next time, no matter how high the pressure gets, just stay on purpose.